Last week, I had the chance to sit down with a bunch of fifth grade boys and tell them that they had a responsibility to make their classroom flourish. It was from this idea that God created them to be young men, and they're called to do amazing things that make the rest of the world do the things that it's designed to do. But what do we do when kids have been mistreated or maybe abused or manipulated to do things that don't flourish? When we step in and guide them, how can we do it well and defend them while also giving them muscles that they can do hard things too? And they should be mindful of the manipulation that they might be experiencing so they don't turn and do it on someone else. This feels a little bit cryptic as we start the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment, Facing the Dark. But today, Dr. Kathy is going to unpack a new law that is in the process of being pushed through in Oklahoma to protect kids from pornography using vernacular words. Before we jump into the conversation, I want to let you know that today's podcast is brought to you by Summit Ministries. Summit Ministries does an amazing camp for teens and college-age kids to help them think better about their world and know how they should engage it. You can visit summitministries.org/celebrate kids for more information, and we'll talk about it a little bit more at the end of the show. But for now, here's Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, this next topic that we're going to talk about today is a little bit challenging. So if there are young kids around, a parent might want to hit pause and come back to this episode later. The reason is there's a new bill in Oklahoma that is working to replace the term child pornography with the term child sex abuse material. That would change a lot of the language in all of the Oklahoma statutes. Crafters of this bill note that, quote, the word pornography implies that children can consent, and we know children can't. It puts the emphasis on the crime that is being permitted. It moves into digital media, online presence, and those sorts of things as well, which child pornography didn't necessarily do, end quote. So, Dr. Kathy, I wonder how important it is for us to adjust the way that we talk and think about things like this to recognize really the situation that children are in, especially when there's an abuse or a crime or maybe even a misrepresentation or a poor representation of a child in a situation. Is this move in language beneficial, and should we as parents maybe work to update our vocabulary?
I was surprised by this report, and I had to actually think about it longer than I kind of expected to, because you give me a little bit of warning of what we're going to talk about on this podcast. It is sexual abuse when children are forced into being a part of pornography. So do I think it's a good idea? Yes, because language matters. It is abusive. And we know that it often leads to other abuse. It's very common that children who are corralled into child pornography, playing a part in a photo or even, heaven forbid, a movie, are often then trafficked and they find themselves being sexually active way too soon. So is it abusive? Yes. So is the language change valuable? Yes. Do I think it's going to take off? Probably not. So I'm going to be a little bit pessimistic there. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I think that it's important for us to challenge ourselves in thinking about this as well, partly because I think that technology plays some really dynamic roles in this conversation. And I say that word technology really thinking in my mind to this idea of the techniques, the way that we approach specifically kind of this topic. Is pornography just limited to that one thing? But does different techniques really explode this whole thing open that really we need to address and talk through what is actually happening? Because there are many people that act on different impulses years and decades ago because of the different technologies or techniques today, when they never would have had the opportunity to act on those same impulses or proclivities that they might have felt natural to years ago. So thinking of this in terms of our kids, what's important for us to remember when technology can accelerate even the way that some people might have had a check in their spirit or a temptation, but now they can engage it quicker or more readily because of different techniques or technologies to do that. How should we be mindful of this as parents?
One of the most important things that we need to own as adults and then teach our young people is, impulse control. And again, what are our values, which helps us determine what is right and wrong. So if a child knows that God created man and woman in his image for his good and his glory, and that every person created is a miracle and has been knit together carefully, and everything about him and her has been chosen by God as creator, then we're not gonna want to demean anyone of our gender or another gender. We're going to want to hold them up as representatives of the image of God. If we know that in the knowing of our knowing, I like to say, then I think we'll bounce our eyes very quickly when we see something that's inappropriate, and we might report it. We would say to a mom, look at this. This is wrong. And we would ask a dad for help, and we wouldn't be ashamed to need the help. And one of the things that I think has been so challenging as I watch and I look at the years that I've been alive is how much has been sexualized. The joke is, but it's not funny. When I was young, toothpaste was about the only thing that I would consider sexualized. If you buy this brand of toothpaste and use it, twice a day, you're going to have these amazing teeth, and therefore you'll have this amazing date on your arm. Now when I look at what's in the media, if you will, everything's been sexualized. And that's really sad because children are not objects, they're children.
I think that goes to this idea that really children are being exposed to some things or some ways of looking at the world that are hypersexualized, whether it's in things like cartoons or when they go to the store to buy clothes and they see the different ways that things are presented or even their favorite snack food. A lot of this is really, sexualized or hypersexualized. And then things on devices, when your kids will interact with it, whether it's on your device that they might be looking at pictures or seeing something happen kind of in a video or what have you, that we can kind of lose sight of the reality that this is really an issue that seems to be all around us and really is abusive to our kids. When our kids find themselves in these situations, or maybe even they've pursued it, and they're on some kind of a device or what have you, how should parents address it? What do parents do when they find out that their kid has been engaging in some of these, situations that we're talking about?
Well, ideally, we don't panic. And ideally, we don't make it about us being quote unquote bad parents because our son or daughter stumbled upon something or chose to pursue something. It is about the child and the heart of the child. I think we say, I'm so sorry that you saw that. I'm so sorry that you've chosen to embrace that in your free time, however you might want to say that. I think we thank them for being honest. If we say that our love is unconditional and there's nothing they can ever do that would cause us to love them less or more, and if we say, you can tell us anything, we want to be your everything. Like you don't want them to go to Siri. You want to be their Siri, if you will. Then you have to accept their honesty and you have to say, thank you. Don't make them feel in that moment of their bold declaration horrible because they'll stop coming to you when other things go wrong. And then we get help. Can we help them? We might be able to help them depending upon what's going on. Or we might want to talk to someone with experience. Maybe you know of a family that has had a child pursue pornography before yours did, and you can find out in that family what worked to get them, off of the devices and to get them restored to righteousness. Maybe you need professional help. Maybe not. I think you ask yourself if you have been doing anything that would cause you to be desensitized, that would cause the child to be desensitized. I don't say that lightly, but I think that's a true thing that needs to be brought up. And then I think we get devices out of the room. If there are things that we can point to that contributed to the issue, then we take care of that. We get devices out of the room. We give them something else to do in their spare time. And yes, we could read scripture, but we don't make scripture a punishment. Because you've done this, we're now going to read the book of Proverbs every day for 31 days. Yeah, read the Bible because the scripture is really practical and helpful, but don't make it a punishment.
As Dr. Kathy was talking, it reminded me of a passage that comes out of Proverbs chapter 4, and I'm going to begin reading at verse 23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Keep your mouth free of perversity. Keep corrupt talk from your lips. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. I think the writer of this proverb really approached this sequence on purpose, guarding your heart, being mindful of how we speak, to keep our mouth from perversity, to change the original intent of something to something that it wasn't intended for, and then to look straight ahead with your eyes. What we talked about today really addressed that second concept, keeping your mouth free from perversity, watching the words that we use. I think the insights that Dr. Kathy gave and also the teachings from this proverb really can guide us as we encourage our kids to live in the light and not to live in the dark, and not to pervert something that was intended for good and to prefer it almost and live in the dark, but to seek out the light and what it does for us. What if today we celebrated the light, highlighted the things that we love that are good when they're exposed to light? One of our favorites in our family is the mountain range. We just love seeing the sun rise in the mountains in Calgary, Alberta. It's a place we visit frequently, and it's just awe-inspiring. So maybe today, rather than talking about the dark things that we could, as we've done a little bit on this show today, let's talk about the beautiful things that God calls us to and encourage our kids to pursue that. I think that can be that bright light that they need to rise above and cut through those dark times that they're going to face. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment, Facing the Dark. You know, this podcast is brought to you today by Summit Ministries. Summit Ministries does a 2-week camp. It's a worldview deep dive. They bring in speakers like Kathy Cook, John Stone Street, and they do a deep dive into thinking, teaching kids and guiding them to think well on different ideas and topics that they're going to face in the coming years. Things like marriage and what to do with technology and how do we have and discover our identity as it's given to us by Christ. It's a 2-week camp in either Manitou Springs, Colorado or Lookout Mountain, Georgia. And it's probably one of the best investments you can make with your kids or your grandkids this summer. I encourage you to check it out. Just go to summitministries.org/celebrate kids for more information. Again, that's summitministries.org/celebrate kids. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender, and I want to say thanks for listening, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again on Monday.